Welcome back to a brand new episode of IDTALK4ED Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Sarfo-Mensah. If this is your first time tuning in to the podcast, I welcome you, and I hope that you come back for future episodes and new content. And if you are a returning listener or viewer of the podcast, I welcome you back, and I hope that tonight's episode is one that you find informative, inspiring, and enlightening. So before we get to the conversation and introducing tonight's guest, I want to just let people know to hit that subscribe button on YouTube to get notifications on future episodes and just any content related to Identity Talk. So you'll see our podcast episodes and other content that we put up there. So make sure you hit that red subscribe button, and thank you kindly for your support. All right, let's get to the main event. So tonight's guest is somebody who I highly admire. I've learned so much from her from afar, just the way that she shows up, not just on social media, but just in everything regarding education, how she shows up for Black women, how she shows up for just everybody who is oppressed within the profession. And what's even doper about this episode is I get to interview somebody who is from my home state, Connecticut. So I don't always get to interview people who are from where I'm from. So, we're going to talk a little bit about that and some of the misconceptions that people have, about my home state, because I've heard them throughout the years. But all seriously, though, we're going to be talking about everything from Black women, from just school culture, the politics of education, and a whole lot of other topics. So I am excited to bring on my good friend and someone who you all are going to love, Deidra Fogarty. Is going to come on and talk to us. So let's do it. What up, D?
Hey, hello. Hey, everybody. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How you feeling?
I am doing great. I'm excited to talk to y'all.
Yes. So listen, so you are from Connecticut. You grew up in Bridgeport, which is the south side of the state, closer to New York.
Yep.
I grew up in Bloomfield, closer to the Massachusetts side. So I just want to know, what are some of the misconceptions people have shared about Connecticut? Because I've heard a lot of them, but I'm curious to know what you've heard.
Yeah, it's interesting because, when I moved out of Connecticut, it was right after college, and people automatically assumed that I was rich. They automatically just assumed that, that there are no Black people in Connecticut and that I must be rich, which is not true. I'm like, no, it's interesting though, because when I went to college, I went to UConn, University of Connecticut, which is a predominantly white college. And I remember, going there, being this girl from Bridgeport and telling people, classmates and things like that I was from Bridgeport, and they were like, "Oh, you must be from the hood." And it's just like, okay, so y'all here saying all these things about Bridgeport, right? And then a couple years later, I'm having to defend myself in terms of Connecticut. So I just feel like people just have such a mixed understanding of what it is like to live in Connecticut. And really, although Connecticut is very, I would say it's very I consider it to be kind of segregated in terms of how suburban versus urban, things like that. But on the same side, where I grew up in Bridgeport, it was very diverse. It was extremely diverse. I grew up with all different types of people. And so I went to schools that were like that too. I went to magnet schools. So I just expected all schools to be like that. And then I realized that's not the case. That is not the case.
No, you're right. And that was kind of the same thing with me too, especially when I went to college in Philadelphia. I had a lot of people just clown me. "Oh, you from Connecticut? Oh, you must be rich. Yo, you bougie. You talk all proper." I'm like, nah, have y'all ever been to Hartford? Have y'all been to Waterbury, New Haven? Listen, we got Black folks here. we got some people here. You just gotta come and see it for yourself.
Exactly. I mean, we have cities just like anybody else, anywhere else, So,
For real. But let's get in because we have a lot to talk about. So, first thing I like to ask my guests to do is to just share a little bit about yourself and what ultimately brought you into the education field.
What brought me into the education field? So I was someone who in high school, I started working with children. So started working at a daycare. Then I started working at an after school program. And it was interesting because I was always a student. It was like a B average type of student. And I never really felt like there was something that I was like really, really, really good at. Until I actually started working with children. And I remember I had a boss and I was a high schooler and she was just like, oh my God, you're so good at this. Like you should think about becoming a teacher. And I was just like, oh, okay, maybe I should. And so from there, I started working at like more after school programs, summer camps. And then I made a decision to go to UConn. They had a really strong school of education. And it was one of those where you had to apply into it. So there was a chance that I wasn't going to get in. And then I had made a plan. I was like, if I don't get in, I'm going to transfer to another college in Connecticut. But then I got in and I've always been one of those people that just knew that I wanted to work with children. And initially it was I just thought of it as, being able to provide a strong educator for students anywhere, no matter where they live. Because one thing that I realized, and this is part of like growing up in Connecticut, and in Bridgeport is surrounded by some very wealthy cities, wealthy towns. Yes. And so when I was younger, we had some experiences of going to other schools. We had like a pen pal program or something. And I'll never forget, we went to a school, it was maybe like 20 minutes away in the town over. And their school was just so different than mine. And I remember they had a rock climbing wall. I remember it was just like the kids would just be able to walk around on their own. And I was just like, y'all just get to walk around. Even the cafeteria was like a different caliber of food.
No supervision.
Wow. It's so crazy how and it's literally like 15, 20 minutes away. And I never forgot that. And I remember going into education when I wrote my philosophy of education, my junior year, it was like, I want children, any child or student deserves to have a great educator, a great teacher, no matter where they live. Like, it shouldn't matter where you live. It shouldn't matter what neighborhood you come from. You deserve to have an excellent teacher. And that's what, I wanted to become that type of teacher. So yeah, that's why I went into education.
Yeah. When I wrote my educational philosophy, I'm not even gonna lie, I just put in a bunch of buzzwords and I just regurgitated stuff that I was learning in my grad program. I had no idea what the hell like I was gonna be doing and what my philosophy was. Mm-hmm. I was just happy to be there.
Right.
But we'll get more into that later on. I'll table that. So COVID-19 has impacted so many people, particularly educators. So I'm interested in knowing, how has the pandemic transformed you as an educator, but also as a human being?
Right. Well, I think, as a human being, it was a huge transition to go from like working. At the time, I was a self-contained special education teacher. So I had 8 students. I had a team of paraprofessionals that worked with me, and it was very, we had a very tight-knit group. And so when we went from that to being virtual, it was really, initially, it was just like a shock to the system because my students, that was a completely different way to engage with them. And many of the strategies that I saw some teachers jumping into, we just weren't able to do that because with my students, we have to teach them how to navigate the computer and things like that, right? They have severe disabilities. And so that was initially very challenging. But then after a while, like I would say by the time, because we kind of jumped into it in March, by April, we kind of got into the swing of things. And I was in a space where I had like autonomy and my team was very strong, dependable. So we just made it work to the best of our ability. But at the same time, it was super challenging because we often would have students that we would have a hard time getting in contact with their families. Like that was the biggest challenge, where sometimes parents will respond, sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes they would come on Zoom, sometimes they wouldn't. Right. Sometimes they tell us, sometimes they wouldn't. And our students really, like, every single day, it was so important for them to be engaged in instruction, because we had spent so long building up those systems and routines. And, you know, it was a big adjustment for them as well. And that was my thing too. I don't think a lot of times, you know, for my students, they have, some of them had autism, Down syndrome, or a severe intellectual disability. So the parents became very, like, they had to take on the role of the teacher, right? And so oftentimes, like, you're taking on the role of a teacher, right? But you also have other children at home. And so it was, I think it was an adjustment for all of us. And I think for me, I would consider myself a homebody. And so I actually liked being in the house and teaching, right? I was absolutely fine with that. But I feel like there was always those feelings of just wanting to do more. Right. And then feeling frustrated that there was nothing more that I can do, right? Because I had to, like, you know, I could become one of those teachers that's just like driving around the city and drop, because we did do things like that. We would go to the kids' houses and drop things off and things like that. But like those were our limitations, right? Like if there was not, it just became a frustrating thing where it was like, okay, like I want to be able to help this family right now because I know that they're going through a lot. There are other kids that are in school. I remember grandma was taking classes. Like everybody was taking classes at the same time on Zoom, right?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Like, you know, at the end of the day, I'm happy we're on Zoom, but then, you know, it's like we had to try to make the best of the situation, but it was definitely challenging. But I will say, you know, for myself, having a smaller group of students versus having a large class, I do think that made an impact on, because I've talked to other educators who have, you know, very large class sizes, and some of them were teaching hybrid model and things like that. So it has been, you know, very difficult for many educators. And, you know, for myself, I think we were able to make it work to the best of our ability, but there was a lot of different mixed emotions through the process.
No, I'm sure. And being a special education teacher, right? How do you deal with students who have IEPs, particularly those who require high intervention? Because there are certain things you just can't do virtually.
Absolutely.
So I used to teach in a school that had a lot of ASD students who had autism, and when they have episodes, you gotta be there to de-escalate. Like there's a process you have to go through. There are protocols.
Absolutely.
Now that you're in a virtual setting, how do you provide those interventions for students like our ASD students?
Right.
Students with IEPs.
It was definitely a transition. You know, one of the things that we use with our students is like token boards. So, and that was in person, right? They would do something like, all right, put your token on. Good job. You get 5 tokens. You get to take a break. We transferred that into the virtual space where it's like, all right, you're doing what you're supposed to do and token on. We did a lot of frequent breaks. I found we just had to. Like you can't do a whole out, because I would do one-on-one sessions with my students.
Okay.
We're not doing whole group classes because that is not going to happen. It wasn't going to happen. So we had to do one-on-one sessions. We had recommended for parents to be close by. That always wasn't the case, but there was a lot of times where it was just like freaking breaks. All right, we're going to do this 10-minute lesson. Then we're going to watch Paw Patrol for 2 minutes. All right, we're going to do this 10-minute lesson. Now, what do you want to watch? PJ Masks? All right, we'll do that for 2 minutes. Like we had to keep doing those frequent breaks to be able to keep my students in particular engaged, because at the end of the day, they need to touch, they need to be able to manipulate, move, all those things. And now we can't do it, right? We can't do it. And some, you know, I remember we sent them home with like a toolkit, like a supply box. And then one of the moms was like, Miss Fogarty, that box is tore up. It's gone. I don't know what to say. And I'm like, because it needed to be replenished. But after a while, it was just like, all right, well, we're at the end of the year. We're going to make it work. But, you know, we just had to do the best we could. And like I said, a lot of that meant me having to be like very much more animated than I am. I had to be very animated, very extra, play a lot of music, do a lot of dancing, just think out the box. And that was, I mean, that I've been in, this is my 15th year. So it was definitely something totally new. But at the end of the day, like we made it work. My students show progress, you know, they definitely, and it made me realize that having that one-on-one time and really just like very focused for some of my students, that was extremely beneficial for them. So it made us think like, well, how can we take some of the things that we did in the virtual space and kind of integrate it into when we go back into the building?
Right.
Yeah.
But I would also think that it was an audition, you know, as far as trying out more of a flip classroom model where, okay, you know, we're virtual. I can't teach you everything. We're going to be asynchronous from time to time.
Right.
So here you go. Here are some of these videos. Go ahead, watch them.
Yep.
You let me know what you learned from it, as opposed to me having to, you know, dictate and just share what's going on. So I feel like there were some benefits to being virtual.
Right. And I mean, my hope is that schools go into fall really being reflective, because I feel like a lot of times, I feel like right now, many school leaders are in the, okay, let's prepare for in-person. Let's think about all the logistics and all that stuff. And I get it, right? Because COVID is still out there. But I really want school leaders to be reflective about like, well, what worked during this time period, and how can we, and like what didn't work, right? And what wasn't working before, and how can we really integrate those things into our practices when the school year starts. And I don't know. I think I just feel like that kind of went over some people's heads.
Yeah, I think for many districts, they missed out on the opportunity.
Absolutely.
To be innovative.
They sure did.
And to shift their paradigm as far as how we think about education and how we go about doing it.
Yep. I mean, it's like, part of this is just because like I have a lot of friends that are in school leadership. And so I often ask them, so like, what are you guys doing in the summer? Like, how are you preparing? And oftentimes I'm hearing a lot of operational logistical things. Like that's what the focus is. And I get it, right? I get it. You know, as a school leader, those things are really important, especially now. But I just want to, I mean, there are so many things that just having the space to think about what worked. How can we integrate that into the school? Like, how can we be more innovative? You know, all that type of reflection space. I feel like we just kind of went from, okay, pandemic to like, we got to catch up. And it's like, okay.
Yeah. It's real.
Right.
But let's go ahead and transition, because I want to let's talk about Black Girls Teach.
Yes.
So for those who know you and follow you closely, they know what Black Girls Teach is about. But for those who may not be familiar with the work that you do within Black Girls Teach, share with us what inspired you to start it, but also what's the overarching mission of Black Girls Teach? What are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah. So what inspired me to start Black Girls Teach was I found that in my career, I had experienced many different challenges, and I found that there were other women, Black women, that were experiencing some of the same challenges. And what was able to like really anchor me and get me through was being in community with other Black women. My friends are all Black women educators or school leaders. And because of that, because of just being surrounded by them, I feel like I've been able to kind of get through those challenging situations. And so my first idea was I wanted to have a conference, and I wanted it to be led by the amazing Black women educators that I know. And I wanted to bring Black women educators across the country to this conference. I remember the idea literally popped into my head while I was driving down the New Jersey Turnpike. And then I was like, okay, I called one of my friends and I'm like, all right, I'm going to have this conference. It's going to be led by Black women educators. It's going to be for Black women educators. And I don't know what to call it. And she's like, well, okay, well, keep thinking about it. And I thought about it a little bit more in the drive. And by the time I hit Delaware, Black Girls Teach, the name came to my head. And so for me, I knew I wanted to have this conference. I knew I wanted to bring Black women educators together. I did not think about the magnitude of the idea just right then and there, but I knew that I had to leverage social media to be able to make this conference happen, because at the end of the day, like I knew how social media worked because I had a social media account for one of the businesses that I started with my sister. And so I understood the game of social media, and I understood like how marketing and branding and all that type of stuff works. So I was just like, okay, well, I really want to kind of build this platform. And initially it was to be able to have this conference, and maybe it becomes something where we just have conferences every year. But as the idea grew and as time went on, it became so much more of that. It really, and so Black Girls Teach is really an organization that centers the needs of Black women educators and amplifies the voices of Black women educators in every single thing that we do. And so what that looks like is we offer professional development where Black women's needs are centered. And sometimes that means these are professional developments exclusively for Black women educators, and sometimes they are inclusive and everybody's welcome to come, right? Because at the end of the day, we are still centering Black women educators' perspectives, because oftentimes our voices are silenced. Oftentimes we are just disregarded or copied or just all those different things. And at the end of the day, I wanted to be able to provide a space that centered us. But it's also really important to me to empower Black women educators as well as empower my community. And so one of the things that from the organization, when we have different events, like I've been able to connect with so many different educators from across the country, across the world. And even just, I did not expect for our community to be filled with so many different types of people, right? Because I thought like, okay, this idea is like Black women educators, but then I realized, you know, oftentimes Black women educators are saying the things that many other folks are thinking, right? And so when people are hearing it, they're like, yep, I agree, right? Yep. And it could be a old white lady who's been teaching for 50 years. She's in the corner like, yes, right? And that's because those are the people that are in my DMs. I get all different types of people that who reach out to me, and we chit chat in the DMs. And at the end of the day, to me, that's a powerful thing, because I'm very unapologetic about just centering Black women educators, and, you know, those folks that have tapped into the community and attend our events or share our content. I think that the messages that we share resonate with our community. And so from there, part of the work that we do as well as we work with schools. So we do consulting in terms of, you know, DEI work, but then affinity spaces, and then work specifically for Black women educators, developing them into leadership, things like that. And our empowerment circle, which is our membership community, that's another space where our exclusively for Black women educators, where they're getting continuous personal and professional development. So yeah, that was a long-winded response.
No, but I think it's important that you shared everything just to give us context.
Yeah.
And to be honest, for me personally, Black Girls Teach is the first of its kind that I've seen where Black women educators are centered. And this is something that you've been very vocal about.
Yeah.
It's about every platform. You talk about this all the time. So I know how you feel about it.
Yeah.
And just speaking as a Black man in education, I know that I was able to get the opportunities that I received because of the fact that I was a Black man. And there's so many districts, so many states who focus their efforts on recruiting Black male educators, retaining Black male educators. Right. You know, you have nonprofits based on that. So many of them.
Yes.
But how come we don't give that same energy to our sisters, right? Because they go through a lot of the same things that we go through. They have the invisible tax imposed on them. They have the racial battle fatigue just like we do, right?
Yeah.
But you have to add the fact that we live in a patriarchal society. So of course, there's the sexism that happens, the hypersexualization that happens just through the policies that are in place. And I can go on and on about
Absolutely.
that. But I'm interested in knowing, because I think this is something that we want to expound upon.
Right.
Why is it that we don't see a lot of organizations or programs like yours that provide that space for Black women educators to just share, their challenges?
I think because, I feel like as Black women educators, sometimes I feel like we are often seen as just invisible, even though behind the scenes or even in the spotlight, we're doing amazing things. But for some reason, it's not enough. And I do think that has to do with both the racial tone of it, the racial and gender, right? Both of those things combined, right? And then also on top of that, educator. So, right, you're Black, we are Black women, and we're Black women educators, and educators as a whole, like, we're constantly fighting for respect. So when you take those three different things, I see evidence of it every day where I feel like we're constantly just fighting to be heard, fighting to be seen, fighting for people to not perceive us in so many toxic ways. And it's interesting because, like, I was just, right before I got on here, I was watching a video, and it was an incident that happened at Victoria's Secret or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it was a white woman who attacked a Black woman, or tried to attack her, and the Black woman was recording it. And the white woman kind of fell out, did the whole thing. She started crying, all of that. And when the Black woman called the security guard, they kind of just brushed it off like it wasn't a big deal. And like it wasn't important. Like, that Black woman shouldn't have felt threatened, right? And I think that society has painted Black women to be so strong, so independent, all of these different things where it's kind of like we're superheroes, like we're supposed to just fix everything, without really acknowledging how much it takes to be that way. And in the sense of, in education, I have seen for myself, I've seen the emphasis on, when we talk about Black teacher retention and recruitment, oftentimes it is on Black male educators. And it's not just, it should be, right? Because we know the power of a Black man in the classroom, right? We know the power of that. That is the powerful thing. I think what I constantly am trying to do is fight for the same level of support with Black women, especially because I just see so many Black women just doing amazing things behind the scenes and seeing all the battles that we have to fight just to be like recognized. And sometimes we're still not recognized. And it's just like, I just want that same energy. I want that same energy. And so I often say, and I put a post out about this the other day where it's like, if we're having all male panels, whether it's all Black males or just males in general, you can't not talk about the privilege you have in this education space. Because if you're not talking about it, that means maybe you're just not aware of it. And maybe it's just one of those things where it's just like how some people perhaps weren't aware of white privilege. Folks are not aware of that privilege, but we can't do it. We can't skip that conversation, because that to me is harmful. It's harmful to not be able to say, like, that as Black men in this education space, there are certain privileges that come with it, especially right now. And so I just don't know if people are willing to have that conversation just yet. I know it's coming, though. It's coming. Like, the more people are starting to talk about it, more people are starting to share their experiences. And I never want to have a conversation about it and like feel like, I don't want people to think I'm like bashing Black men or any of that, because I'm, at the end of the day, like, I love Black men. Like, you all are so important. You're needed. But I just, too often I've just seen too many Black women who are left to just pick up the pieces after like and I was one of those, like being ignored or being villainized or being pushed out. And now we're left to just figure it out. And our career has taken all these different turns. And only to see someone who, might not have the same level of expertise as us, but has a certain level of privilege be promoted. Like, that's a hard thing to see. And I've seen it happen. And I've seen a lot of other Black women that have seen it happen. And so at the end of the day, I think me talking about it freely helps other people feel more comfortable to talk about it as well. And I hope that that's what happens. Like we move from, talking about it to talking about it a little bit more deeper, to really starting to interrogate our own actions and the part we play in it. And, hopefully change can come. Like at the end of the day, you got to make people aware of this. So.
Right. And just to be clear, I've heard you talk about this many times. I've been in many of your lives where we've talked about this, and you've talked about this in clubhouse rooms. So I know where your heart is. And, you are somebody who always shows up, for Black men in education. And you're right. It's not always reciprocated.
Right.
You're absolutely right. And when you just think about Black women in general, and I posted about this maybe a week ago, like, y'all do everything. Y'all got to be the matriarchs.
Yep.
Even when we F up, you pick up the pieces there, right? Yep. And we just tend to get 9 lives, but y'all don't get 9 lives. Like, you have to be damn near perfect,
right?
In everything that you do.
And I think part of it too is this. I mean, part of it is like, many of us, we step into these like other mothering roles, right? Where kids see us as moms and it's just like, oh, this is just how we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be like, it just becomes like such a natural thing, which is a natural thing for many of us to kind of take on that like, like role in our classroom. But then it's just like, okay, but I'm still important. I still should be valued, right? It's like, but I feel like because people just kind of expect us to be a certain way, they don't see the value in us, and that to me is really, really, really troubling. Especially just when I see some amazing Black women who end up leaving the profession because they just never felt like they were appreciated or valued or good enough. And that to me, at the end of the day, my work is centered in like the students, right? So everything that I'm doing is connected to ensuring that our students have the best educators in front of them, the best leaders in front of them, so they have those opportunities. But what happens when we're constantly losing these amazing educators? Especially now, there are a lot of people that are either leaving the classroom or leaving the profession.
No, you're absolutely right. And they do leave the profession, not because they're not good enough. It's because they're too good.
Right.
That's really what it is. They're too good. And, fragility happens. It comes out in many different ways. There's different manifestations of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to stay on that for a second, because I know you've had many conversations around toxic school culture, classroom politics, whatever you want to call it. I know I've been involved in a lot of these situations. So I know when I first started teaching in 2010, started teaching full time.
Mm-hmm.
I came in feeling like, you know what? I need to just earn my stripes, right? I'm a Black man in a predominantly white woman profession.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have to show tact. If I see certain things, I'll take note of it, but I know that whatever I say could jeopardize my job status, especially as a provisional teacher, as someone who's trying to get permanency within the district.
Right.
So I'm thinking about, my livelihood, being able to pay the bills at the time. So this is before I had, my son and my wife.
Mm-hmm.
But then over time, you start to open your eyes to what's going on. You see some things that don't sit well with you in your spirit. And then you reach a point where it's just like, man, now I'm gonna start saying this. Usually it's after you get permanent. That's how it was for me. After I got permanent and I show people what I can do, I felt like that gave me more credibility to make statements, to be controversial, to call out certain actions that were taking place. So I'm wondering from you, when you Deidra Fogarty came into education, did you come just as you are right now, or was it an evolutionary process where, okay, that paradigm shift happened for you some point in your career because you were just fed up with all the BS?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I've always been an outspoken person, right?
Okay.
And so I remember I didn't go into teaching or like thinking, oh, I was just going to disrupt things. And no, because I mean, I started my teaching career in Baltimore. So I'd moved from Connecticut to Baltimore. So it was a totally new environment for me. So my big focus was just trying to like figure out everything and make it work. But I remember when something didn't make sense to me, I would question it. Right. If something wasn't right, I would say like, I don't know. That doesn't seem right. And I remember one of my coworkers said to me, she was just like, well, I just feel like you can say things a little bit more tactfully. And I was like, what? And I said, why? Like, why do I got to say it all? Like, I'm just saying it. It doesn't seem right, you know? And so I remember that happened early in my career. And then I was just like, I'm just going to be quiet. Let me just do my job and keep it moving. But what the big transition for me, I think, was when I transitioned, and I was in a public school at the time. So I spent about 5 or 6 years in public school, and then I transitioned into charter school. And I think that is where the change came. Because by the time I was in a charter school, I was in like year 7, I would say. And I was at that point where I was like, okay, I want to be a leader. I had done the things to go into leadership. I took the courses. I was studying for the tests. I was in a program. So I was ready to be in leadership. And so when I started working at a school that was considered a prestigious charter school, it was on a TV show, like it was very prestigious. And I remember thinking like, okay, wow, I'm so excited to work here. Like, this is going to be great. And then the reality came where it was totally the opposite of what was shown. And I thought about the movie I saw, where the documentary where they showed the school, and then I was seeing the day-to-day practices. And after, it was a point where I was just like, okay, this doesn't make sense. And I think what the turning point was, where the real switch went off, was when I was at that school for about a year. And the second year they had an opening to be like a literacy coach.
Okay.
And that was something I really had wanted to do. Because I was passionate about literacy. I applied for it. And then I remember the principal, she was just like, well, okay, just kind of like talking around it. And then there was another person at my job, and she was applying for the position as well. And I was okay with that, because I was like, okay, she's the bomb. So if I get it or she gets it, I'll be good. So then I go to a meeting. And we're in the meeting, and the old literacy coach is announcing, because she was going to Harvard. She was like, well, I just wanted to announce our new literacy coach. And I was like, who to do? Because I said I'm still in the application process.
Right.
So, and then another woman who is friends with the principal, she gets up and she's like, I didn't even apply for this job, but I'm just so grateful. And I was just like, and I looked at the other lady who was applying, and I said, what's going on? I thought you was right. And then she said, oh no, girl, I saw the salary and decided not to do it. And then I'm like, okay, well, if you decided not to do it, why was I not the next step? Because it was only me and you applying.
Wow.
And so I remember I was in the meeting and I was just like, yo. And then so I remember I talked to my principal. She was like, oh, well, we decided we're going to split the position. You're going to work with the science and social studies teachers, and she's going to work with the literacy teachers. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, that's not what I said I want to do. I didn't say I want to work with science and social. I'm an ELA teacher. So I just remember in that moment where I was just like, yo, like, this is some effed up stuff. Like, yeah. And I remember all year, when the woman who became literacy coach, she was just like, I didn't even apply for this job, and I was just blessed with getting it. And I was just like, am I in the twilight zone? And then I feel like from that moment on, I just started noticing everything. And I feel like before, I was in a place where like I didn't see like the ugly side of education and how it shows up. You know, I saw little staff squabbles and things like that, but nothing, I think normal things, right? But once I started, and you know, when I went into the charter school world, I'm not saying it's associated with charter schools, but I do think that charters sometimes have certain policies and practices that are conducive to some of the toxic culture stuff. And so there on, my eyes were just wide open. And then I just started realizing, like, I just started seeing so much more. And as I got older, I started being much more vocal too. I was just like, listen, I'm gonna say what I need to say. I am not about to be quiet. Like, I know what I'm talking about. I know how to teach. I can teach any single, and that was another thing too, because I feel like part of being able to speak up and advocate for yourself, there was a confidence I had because I knew that I could teach my behind off. You could put me in kindergarten, second grade, eighth grade, whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm going to make it happen. And so I think that gave me a little bit of confidence to say things more freely. And I always tell educators, you know, sometimes folks don't listen to people who can't teach. If you can't teach, folks are not going to listen to you in your building. You need to work on your craft. Get your craft together, be a master educator. People will take you more seriously and actually listen to what you're saying because they know that you know how to teach. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I just started my path of just like saying what needs to be said.
Right. And I do agree. Yes, there is, you have to have credentials and everything else. Definitely have to have those. But you and I both know it's never a meritocracy.
Mm-hmm.
This is really about social capital. That's what you're describing right there.
Yep.
Your networks,
that's
who
right.
you know, right? But then with regard to just teaching in a public school versus a charter school, I've also been in that situation before where I taught in a district. I'm sorry, let me clarify that because there are charter schools that are public as well.
Right.
But I taught in the district and also taught in a charter school. And I know that with charter schools, they have more autonomy in terms of their policies and procedures because they operate as an independent entity.
Yep.
So they don't have to report to a district, even though the district oversees them in terms of, you know, their charter and other types of requirements. It's free reign. So they can do the lottery and enroll whoever they want to enroll. They can inflate scores. They could do whatever. If they want to fire a teacher, they can fire a teacher without due process.
Yep, because you're an at-will employee.
You're at will. You don't have the backing of a union like you would in a district.
Yeah.
Depending on what city you're in. Right. So one thing that I think I learned a lot more as I got deeper into my career is that I had to be a student of my school handbook. I had to be a student of my district handbook.
That's
because what happens is the handbooks get weaponized. People weaponize what they know from the handbooks to impose harm.
Yep.
Racial harm on our students, but also as a way to cut access off from you when it comes to certain opportunities that come about.
Absolutely. And one of the things, it's interesting because like Rakim, the insightful teacher, me and him did a class, You Are the Asset. And that was one of the things we had to teach teachers. Like, you need to understand, study that handbook, right? Because as soon as you do something and you start like, as soon as you become like a target, you will get emails and they're going to start referencing the things in the handbook against you. So you need to know already what's coming, right? I remember I had a friend where like they all of a sudden got on the principal's radar. The principal wanted them out and something happened. Immediately after that, I just wanted to follow up with you regarding in section 8 on page this in the handbook, it states this. Right. And they do that because they need to leave a paper trail. They need to show documentation that they're talking to you about these things.
Yep.
Even though 6 months ago, it wasn't an issue. Right. Mm-hmm. So like teachers really have to look at that handbook, that staff handbook, their district handbook, the student one as well. Parents, I always tell parents too, everybody, we need to be reading these handbooks because when whenever somebody's trying to cover themselves or throw somebody under the bus or get rid of somebody, that is what they're going to use. They're going to use those things, and they're going to say that you signed off and you said you read it. You said you read it, you signed off on it, and this is what it is, right? So it's like part of it is taking back some of your power and ensuring that you actually know like what you did sign up for. You know, I always tell people too, when you're applying for jobs, you should, and you're like getting close to the end, ask to see their handbook.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see your handbook.
No,
let me see. Sure. I want to know what your policies are so I can make the decision about whether or not I want to work here. Because sometimes you apply for the job, then you find out you're only allowed to call out 5 times. And then after that, you get written up. Which is actually something that someone told me was a part of their school policy.
That is ridiculous. That is just ridiculous. And what's crazy is we didn't learn this stuff in our teacher prep programs.
Oh, no.
They just taught us how to get ready for praxis tests, whatever licensure test you take, right? That's all that was about.
Yeah.
I know for myself, I went through the motions and got my degree, got my certification because like I was coming in as someone who had been in the classroom for a few years. So it wasn't, so a lot of stuff that they were talking about wasn't new. It was more about learning the terminology that you needed to learn to pass the test. That's really what that was. But I feel like there should be a course on this very issue. Like, how do you navigate your school community?
Yeah.
How do you deal with toxic school culture, right? What are some protocols that you have to be aware of, right? Like, you should know that when you're getting emails from a principal or a school leader who you feel is harassing you, you got to do a running record.
That's right.
Every email, you save all that documentation. You don't throw nothing away.
Right.
You know?
Right. And too often educators, you don't learn those things until there's a target on your back already. Right. So like, you know, and I think like the masterclass Rakim and I did, You Are the Asset, we break down all of that. But I think it's like, it's one of those classes that I do think that like beginning year teachers need to hear, because a lot of us, you know, those things that me and Rakim, we had learned about the hard way, right? We had to go through the process and now we're teaching you. There was just even just some things about like emails, like that's a whole thing in itself, right? Because some folks, some of these organizations, when they really want to get you out, you might lose your email access. So where are you saving these emails? You know, you got to forward them to another email address or print them off, but you have to have a system. And the thing is, like, for some of us, we can go from being like, you know, the love staff that everybody loves and likes, and especially for, I think, Black women and Black men a lot of times, or anybody that's very vocal, to someone who's on the list, someone who has a target on their back. And the thing about charter schools, not all, because I think some of them have unions, but most of them are pretty much at-will employees. Like, you know, your principal has a say in whether or not they want to ask you back. And in some places it's very transparent. You don't have anything to worry about. But like for some other organizations, you don't know if you're going to get your contract. So every year you're just wondering, am I going to get a contract? And I have seen school leaders weaponize that, where it's just like, okay, like I don't like you, and no, I'm not going to ask you back. You're no longer a good fit. And then that's that. And then you're like, oh, okay. So now you have to figure out how it's not an issue of like finding another job, but now you got to explain to another job that you were not asked back. And that's not right. That's not right. No. It's not a good situation to be in. It causes a lot of unnecessary stress.
Yes, it does. So, and this is a perfect segue into this next question, because I know that you recently made a professional transition, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, so many of us Black educators, we have a tendency to overstay our welcome in certain schools because we don't want to leave our kids behind. We don't want to abandon them. You know, there's that guilt that comes with leaving behind kids who you've built connections with, and even their families too.
Mm-hmm.
I've been guilty of it. You know, last school I taught in, love the kids, still talk to them to this day. We have some who are actually going to college right now. So I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
But I knew for me, it got to a point for me when my principal pretty much told me that I was the most incompetent, most insubordinate teacher like on staff. And this is like near the end of my last year because we had been butting heads, and
Right.
I'm not gonna go into all that. But what's crazy is I was there for 5 years, and more times than not, I was at the building before she was.
Right.
Never missed a day.
Yeah.
You know, never late for school. Went above and beyond. I'm throwing parties for my middle school kids because no one else was doing nothing for them. Right. I was taking them to see Black Panther Hate You Give because I'm like, yo, this is an opportunity for kids to learn something.
Yeah.
Right. So I was doing a lot of those extracurricular things because there was a void, like in our middle school, and no one else was picking up the pieces. So I was that teacher who was like, all right, I'll do it. And then it just got to a point where it became, oh, all right, Mr. Sarfo-Mensah is going to do it. That's like his thing. But I was trying to make it the school's thing.
Right.
Because when you're building school culture, it should never leave with the person. It should still permeate regardless of the composition of your staff. Yeah. And I was trying to establish that. But of course, when I left, everything just kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, when do you know that it's time to go? When do you know it's time to go?
I mean, so I feel like, you know, we have an internal feeling where I know for me, when I was feeling like I dreaded, and it wasn't necessarily like dreading going to work. It was more of like feeling the dread of going to like staff meetings, professional development, things where I would be around the other adults or somebody facilitating learning, because those were the times where I would see just that would get frustrated the most during those moments. But I feel like when you are dreading going to work or just being able to interact with certain people, when you are feeling like you are not happy, when it's starting to manifests in you physically. I know for me, I feel like I was eating a whole lot more than I usually eat because it was like stress eating. I remember when I made the decision to resign from my position, my chest was hurting me because of like the previous conversation that I had with my school leader. And I don't think that's a good thing. Like, I don't feel like the way you are like interacting with someone at your job, your boss, should make your chest hurt. I just don't feel like that is a healthy thing. And I felt like I was not valued. I wasn't appreciated. And I'd already been in a space like that before. And I know the toll that it takes on you when you stay in a space long enough where you're not valued, you're not appreciated, you're not given positive feedback, you're not like included in things. And that was the case for myself and my students. I saw on both ends I feel like because of my students and their high needs, and because a lot of times their data didn't count for a lot of things, they did not show a lot of investment in my students. And that trickled into not a lot of investment in my team. And that for me was very frustrating because it was just like, these are the students that you should have the highest level of investment in. Number one, we're showing a lot of progress and growth. But number two, like, they have very high needs and we should be supporting them. They deserve the same amount of support and resources as any other child in this building. So for me, it was just that constant feeling of being frustrated. And I just no longer wanted to feel that way. And because it also was impacting, I feel like it was impacting how I was showing up in other spaces, in my opinion. I felt like, you know, if I'm around my friends, I don't have anything positive to say about work, except for my kids. Like I'll have positive stuff when I'm telling stories and things like that, right? But I mean, when it comes to all the other things, like just the adult behaviors and just the lack of professionalism and leadership and all those things, like I see these things so clearly. And I really try my best to like be able to give support, give feedback, because at the end of the day, you know, I recognize like my role as the educator. Like I made a conscious decision to go back into the classroom when I was in leadership and to teach. right? I made that decision because I was like, I'm going to teach. And part of that was because of me building Black Girls Teach. I knew that, like, if I'm going to be a school, that's just going to be too much for me to be a school leader and build Black Girls Teach. So I made a decision to stay in the classroom. But it got to a point where I was just no longer happy. This was not doing it for me. And although I felt a tremendous amount of guilt because I was not only leaving, because I resigned in May. So I left before the school year ended, right before they wanted us to go back in person. I was like, this is not going to work. It's not going to work for me. Just because of the way the plan, the layout, everything was just a hot mess. And so I remember feeling a lot of guilt and having to tell my team, which was really, really hard because they're so dependent on, I don't want to say they're so dependent on me, but I was the leader. I was the leader of the team. Sure. And, I'm a lead. Like my team, we're going to be like, have all our stuff together because that's how I am. And so that was a level of like, they depended on that because none of the leaders in the building were doing those things for them. So like, I was that leader for them. And so it was very difficult. And that's why I say a lot of times for educators, when we make the decision to leave, there's a lot of guilt associated with it. So it was my staff and then it was the students, which I don't think like with my students, I feel like I know that they noticed it, but I feel like it was just kind of like they just kind of kept it rolling because part of that is just their disability. Whereas the parents that impacted some of the parents a lot because, I'm leaving. And I had some parents who was like, well, if you're leaving, I'm leaving. We leaving too. We going to another school because this ain't gonna work. And I'm like, well, I mean, y'all might want to go to another school because I don't, I'm going to send you some names of some schools that you should go to but at the end of the day, like that is a hard decision to make. But I feel like anytime you're feeling, you're waking up, you're dreaming about it, you're dreading it, like all of these things manifest. And when you start to feel like you are not, that you're maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not important. Maybe I'm not a good teacher. When you start having that become your inner voice, then it's time to go. And the sad reality is I think many more teachers stay in places much longer than they should because of that guilt. And especially if you're working with, students of color, and you feel, I know for me, a higher level of responsibility to stay in that situation. But, you have to put yourself first.
But I also feel like another reason why teachers stay is because they don't recognize their true value.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
They don't realize that, listen, if I go into this teacher free agent market, they're going to be fighting for me. Like, I think that's part of it too.
Absolutely. It is 100% a part of it.
Like whether you want to call it imposter syndrome or just this feeling like, man, I can't do nothing else.
Right. Yeah. And that's another thing we was talking about where it was just like with Rakim and I in the class where we was just like, listen, if your school does not see you as the asset, then you go somewhere else. Just like what just happened with what's the name when she went to Howard?
Nicole Hannah Jones.
Right. Same thing. Like if you don't value me, that's fine. And that's how I was in my previous school. I was just like, it's cool. you don't have, like, y'all don't want to value me. That's fine. Because there are a lot of places that I can go where I know I'm going to be valued. And that is the same for many educators where you have to believe it yourself. You have to believe it where it's just like, I'm going to get a job and I'm going to have multiple job offers. And then I'm going to get to pick the one that I want. Or you can be a consultant or, there are so many options, especially right now. And I think a lot of it is that imposter syndrome. A lot of it is, feeling like you can't do it. And that's one of my big things, really trying to empower educators to realize like you can, and you already have what it takes, period.
But I think it's true. A lot of us really don't recognize our value. And I know for myself, when I left my teacher position in 2019 to move abroad with my wife, who worked with Peace Corps, I knew it was time to move on from the school, but I also knew that I had something that I can leverage, right? Because I had read my first book during like my second to last year, And here's a crazy part. My first customers were my colleagues. They were buying the book. I'm giving
Yep.
the discount, whatever. They loving the book, giving the reviews. Guess who ain't buy the book?
Mm. Not
Take a while
surprised.
again. Right?
Not surprised.
Right. And what's crazy is like, listen, I am one of your best teachers. I mean, if you go to a function with all the other principals and administrators, wouldn't you want to rave about me? Like,
Right.
look who I
Right.
got. Look who I got in my building. I got someone who, is a published author and he's helping teachers,
Absolutely.
whatever. Like,
Yep.
but nah, I didn't get all that. They didn't even buy the book. But and that was disappointing. Cause like, listen, I'm giving y'all a discount. You know what I mean? Before I go on Amazon, like y'all ain't gonna cop the book though. But yeah. So I just felt like I had that. And I had started my LLC, Identity Talk Consulting, around that time too, because I realized, like with what's inside the book, I can actually make a consulting business out of this.
Right.
And help more educators and do workshops and everything. So, and then, of course, once I left, I had time, right?
Right.
I had time to start a podcast. I had time to do a summit. I had time to write another book, and now I'm writing another book. Like, I have time to write op-ed. So the time away has helped me open my eyes to what's been going on, but also being on social media and being very active on it, particularly these last couple of years, has allowed me to say the things that I wanted to say when I was still in the classroom.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's really what being in the teacher grant space on IG has done for me. So, like, when I see you doing your thing, like, you don't realize I learned so much from you just by watching how you move. And I want to say that because, and there are a lot of people, there are other people too, but you're definitely somebody who, like, top 5, like, let's see what D doing. Like, okay, D doing this. I gotta get my stuff together. You know what I'm saying? Not comparing, but it's more like, let me consider that.
Yeah.
Let me add that.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who give me that inspiration as well. But I want to talk about the teacher influencer space because I think that's something that has been transformative for me. And I feel like when I go back into the classroom or in administrative position, right, whatever capacity I'm in, I'm going to be so much better than I was when I left.
Right.
Because of just being in the community. So
right.
I'm interested in knowing your thoughts on the space, but also the racist gatekeeping that happens with educators like ourselves who speak out against issues regarding racism, regarding white supremacy. And right now, the whole thing is about CRT, like talking about things of that nature. What are your thoughts about that with the gatekeeping?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the things that I've noticed in the teacher influencer space, I don't want to. I'm trying to think if I want to call it gatekeeping or what do I want to call it. Let me start here. So one of the things that I noticed in teacher influencer space was that we have some educators that have very, 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 very large platforms like 200, 300, 400, 500,000, followers, right? Who are not talking about any of these things, who are just keeping it all peaches and cream. And, and I get it. At the end of the day, that's not their passion, right? But it kind of, I remember I was looking on one educator today and it was just like, I saw them, they were going to be presenting at a comp, like doing all these things, but not touching on anything having to do with race, privilege, nothing, right? Nothing at all. Just straight up, like, here's my classroom. And I guess I get it. There's a place for everybody. But what I see happening is, for those educators who want to be truth tellers, who want to be able to, like, they oftentimes are struggling to build a brand. They're struggling to kind of like, or it's not as easy to like, just put ourselves out there. And for me in particular, or for the Black women that I've worked with, like, again, a lot of that is imposter syndrome, confidence, things that happen to us within our school context that make us start to feel like, oh, I'm not good enough to like share things about myself. Who wants to follow my page? Who wants to learn from me? Right. And so when that's not true. People do want to learn from you. And so what I've realized is, and the second thing I've realized is that it is more likely for an educator who is a teacher influencer to be able to build a large following. I do think that if they do talk about certain race issues, but I feel like when you're talking about it to white people, meaning I'm teaching you how to unpack your privilege. I'm teaching you like when they're your target audience, that helps you propel as well, right? But because I've seen it happen. I've seen it where it's just like, you're not talking to me, even though you look like me, you're not talking to me, you're talking to white people, which is fine, right? Sure. But to me, that still is, you're still centering whiteness. You're still centering white enlightenment. You're still centering white learning. And again, I just often say, like, where are the spaces for people of color to do this same level of work? Why is it that if we want to talk about colorism and things like that, that is not going to garner as much interest as if we're talking about white privilege, right? So I think that in this teacher influencer space, there needs to, and that's one of the things that I'm working on now is like, I started a social media course for teachers and I have a social media cohort because I'm like, I'm gonna teach y'all the game. I'm gonna teach you how this works because you all have such amazing expertise. You just don't understand how Instagram works, right? And so we need to be the ones positioning ourselves to be speaking at these conferences and things like that. We need to be those ones because when there is a big opportunity and they ask for quotes on education and things like that, they're going to look to the educators who have influence, right? And influence in their terms is like who has a large following.
Or verified, right? Got the blue check.
Exactly, because some of them are verified. And I tried, but I keep getting denied. I don't know what's going on.
What?
Yeah. I'm like, I done them a trademark application. I was like, what am I doing wrong? I have no idea. But it's like, yeah, so they're going to look to those folks. And those are not necessarily the always the folks who we want to speak to us, right? And so and it's sad that it is this way, right? So it shouldn't even matter your number of followers. None of this should matter.
It really shouldn't. It
really shouldn't. Because like I'm working with somebody in my cohort. She's one of my good friends. She's just like brilliant. Like I told her, you're going to be in this cohort. I'm going to teach you. You need to post today. And she's like, I don't know. And I'm like, come on. But she's just so brilliant, filled with ideas, such a strong leader. Like she's guided me in so many different ways, but like has apprehension about social media and gets nervous about it, which is, a real thing. And so I just think that for me, my goal is to help those educators that, who might be feeling a little apprehensive about social media, but who have so much to offer, so much to give, whose voices need to be heard, who are willing to have these tough conversations so that when they're ready to pass the mic, they can get an opportunity to speak, right? I am more comfortable with those educators speaking for us versus some of the influencers that we have now who are not even. I went on one person's page. I didn't even see a post about Black History Month, but I saw something about St. Patrick's Day. I'm like, you didn't post anything about Black History Month, but now you're doing like all of these different sponsored things. And it's just, I just think like this has to change. Like, cause those are folks who are getting opportunities to speak at the podium, right? And so part of me is just like, number one, we have to make our own podium. We have to make our own opportunities, just like how you are right here, right? And number two, but we also need to understand how social media works. Like we can't hide that. Like that's one thing about me. Like I want to be very transparent with others about how I've been able to do this Black Girls Teach thing, right? I don't want it to be like how does she do it? Well, I'll tell you. A lot of it was trial and error, but if you pay attention, you'll see like, I talk a lot about it. But in the other part of it, like you said in that question was that there are some people that don't want to step into the social media space because they work at schools where they can get in trouble. That's why you have to know, what is your school's social media policy, right? Mm-hmm. I know for me, I never said my school's name, and that's just what it was. Like, that there was no policy against me saying whatever, but I just made sure not to say their name when I was working there for the most part. But like, there are some teachers who I've heard where their leaders have looked at their pages or called them into the, like, just a whole bunch of drama in that. And again, when you're an at-will employee, you don't want to do things to, like, you know, get yourself like not having a job at the end of the year. So that is another way that they will weaponize that. So some teachers feel like not comfortable to speak up about things and publicly be themselves. You know, some people have to start anonymous pages in order for them to actually tell the truth. And
yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Burner accounts, huh? We got to start burner accounts.
More people are being vocal about things a whole lot more than they were a couple of years ago. But there are still some people that are just not, they don't feel that level of safety, you know, at their job to be able to freely speak on certain things. Some people, I had somebody tell me one time that she commented on something and they took a screenshot of it and brought it up to her. I'm just too much time on your hands.
That is crazy. But even if you're not talking about something that many would deem controversial, like, social media is a space where it could be a solid professional learning space.
Yes.
Think about how often we complain about how dry our PDs are.
Yeah.
How we don't get the opportunity to build our own agency and you know, enhance our craft.
Yeah.
I learned more from IG Lives.
That's right.
Than I did in my school. Like, real talk. I learned more from the IG Lives and from hearing other people who are in the trenches than I did when I was in the classroom. So I feel like if we're talking about certification, because you have to get PD credits and a certain number in order to advance to the next level, I feel like what we do should be a part of that criteria. I think that has to be amended.
I agree. I think, you know, some of the Instagram live conversations when we were doing Clubhouse, like all the conversations that we're having, teachers are learning things from it. Like, they are learning, right? And honestly, and I haven't even really I don't even talk about instructional strategies, but like, I definitely, like, many of us we could be, if we just wanted to focus on instruction, we could, and teachers would still be learning. And I think that this is a time where things are shifting, where, you know, more educators are realizing that social media can be a space for learning. But I also think, to me, it's also been a strong place to build community, especially over the course of the pandemic. There are so many educators in the past year that I've connected with. And then, like, this year I've been able to, like, meet people in person, and it's just like, you meet people and it's just like, oh my God, we're automatically friends, because we already were kind of friends over the gram. But then you meet people and now you have a community. Now you have somebody else who, if there's a job opening over here, they can let you know. Or if you're dealing with something, you can tap into them and get their advice. And at the end of the day, with the way our education system is set up, you have to have a community. Like, you have to have people that you can talk to. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. You're not. Like, you have to have people that you can get advice from, people who can tell you, like, you need to update your resume. Like, you have to have those people in your community to be able to, like, affirm you, especially when you're in schools where they're not doing that for you. So that is one thing I think the pandemic, it kind of forced us to, you know, really step it up with the social media. That's all we could do. Right. But I mean, many of us have formed, like, genuine friendships and connections with people because of it.
No, that's absolute facts.
Yeah.
Absolute facts. And the fact that for many of them, like, I've never met them in person, except for a few.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we had that synergy and we're that close.
Right.
It just lets you know that the community is real. It's genuine. Like, we genuinely want people to win.
Yep. Absolutely. I love it.
That's the best part about it. All right. So I know we're past the hour, but it's all good when we're having good conversation. That's what
Yeah,
happens sometimes. I think people just don't appreciate long form content the way they used to. Everything has to
right.
be quick and microwave. But I think when we're expounding on these issues, we got to give
Absolutely.
space for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
We have
agree.
to.
Yes.
All right. So let's jump into the lightning round to close
Okay.
things off. So just some quick hitter questions so that people can get to know about you a little bit more. So first question, what are you doing to exercise self-care these days?
Oh, that's a good question. I actually, well, this is kind of weird, but I like to drive, and it's going to sound weird, but I'll drive. I'll go driving somewhere, no radio, no nothing, and kind of I'll just drive somewhere. And for me, it kind of like is a calming thing to just kind of be, and also like if I'm taking a train ride too, I can't do that all the time, but, or walking anytime with like no music, no podcast, nothing as a distraction. So I can just be like one with my thoughts. To me, that is self-care because I like to just be reflective about things. I like to give myself space to think about my feelings and not just always think about like goals and business and all that type of stuff. I just want to anytime I can have that quiet, undistracted time, to me, that's self-care.
Nah, facts. I hear that. A book that you're either currently reading or plan to read this summer?
Oh, so I'm currently reading this book called Honey Girl, and it's actually the Empowerment Circle. It's our book, one of our summer books, and it's really it's about a girl, and she ends up meeting another woman in Vegas, and they get married, and it was totally random. And then she wakes up the next day, she's like, "Oh my God, I'm married," and then they both go their separate ways. But the whole time, like the main character, like her father's very wanting her to be a certain way, and she's feeling like she's not living up to the expectations. And it touches on just this whole idea of like feeling like you have to please your parents, right? And I think that is something that many of us can relate to, where our parents have a certain vision for them, which I feel like my parents are like that. They have a certain vision, like entrepreneur is not what they envision. They want me to have a job, go to work, get my benefits, all those things, right? And it's like sometimes you got to do your own thing. And so I love the book because it definitely kind of pushed me out my comfort zone, but it's so relatable, and it's good to talk about it with others. So it's called Honey Girl.
Honey Girl. All right. And who's the author?
Morgan is her first name. I don't remember her last name.
All right, that's enough information. We can Google that.
Yeah.
No problem. But speaking as someone who has two West African parents, so both my parents are from Ghana. I know from my father, when I told him I want to be a teacher, he was like, why do you want to be a teacher? Huh? Why? There's no money in teaching. I was like, but that's what I love to do, Dad.
Right.
But, that's how it is sometimes. I know, your parents being Caribbean, I'm sure it's the same kind of pressure.
Yeah, they're very, very traditional, very like, okay. I remember I was like, I'm thinking about probably like, maybe leaving my job. And they're like, and then what are you gonna do? What's happening next? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm gonna, I got this Black Girls Teach Day. They're like, well, I think you need to. And I'm like, yo, see, I can't talk to you guys about this because you guys wanted to be like this, that, and that. And I'm like, I've been that way. And you know what? I'm ready to really just try this out and put a lot more energy into it. And, sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you can't please everybody. And, that's just how it is sometimes. So.
No, you're right. So 3 influential figures you're inviting to dinner, dead or alive, who would they be?
Oh, I remember I was thinking about that. Okay. So definitely I would have Malcolm X. I would love to be able to talk with him. I would also say Audre Lorde, because I'm so inspired by her words and her energy. And I would say James Baldwin as well.
Ooh.
Yeah. I would just love to be in community with the 3 of them. And just just listen to the conversation that they have. I remember I met with Rakim and the insightful teacher and Jody, which is her Jody Bell Mercedes there. And it was one of those things. We went out to dinner when I was in New York and I was just listening to them talk. And I was just like, it was such a high level conversation. Like they were talking about education issues and sometimes, a lot of times, like when I'm in spaces like that, like I just like to listen. I don't always want to talk. I just want to listen. And it's just such a good feeling just to hear people engaged in deeper conversations about everything. So that's what it reminded me of.
And Rakim, I had him months ago, and Dari I just had right before you. So
really?
I just had Dari. And you already know the conversation was lit. So
yes. The two of them together, I was just
oh my goodness.
I'm like, y'all are dope.
Yes. So yeah, make sure y'all follow them.
Yes.
Insightful Teacher, and then Jai Mercedes on Instagram. So follow them. They are dope educators. All right. Last question. 3 words to describe where you see Black girls teach from now.
International. I don't know. It's hard for me to put it in words. And I knew this question was coming. And I said, all right, let me think about it. International, revolutionary, and I don't know what the last one is. I mean, I'm going to say empowerment, because at the end of the day, like that's just the thing that I want to continue to do. I want Black Girls Teach. Like my dream is for it to, of course, grow into a sustainable organization that is employing educators, providing opportunity for educators, training educators, doing all of those things. But at the end of the day, like if it's empowering educators, I'm happy with that, because that was the purpose for it. So
there it is. But I believe that will happen. It's just a matter of manifesting and projecting.
Yes, I believe it too.
That's what it is. That's all it is. But Deidra, thank you so much for your time. I know we went a little bit over, but I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
And before you go, let people know how they can connect with you on social media, share your website, anything's coming up with Black Girls Teach. This is yours.
Yes. So we are the Instagram handles Black Girls Teach. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. Our website is www.blackgirlsteach.com. Although I'm currently updating the website. And so some things that are coming up, and I think that you guys will probably see this in August, I think. So we are going to actually be doing a free PD at the end of August, and it's going to be teaching educators how to get their schools to be able to fund their professional developments. There are some strategies and things. I just want educators to know how to do it because your schools can pay. Right, your schools can pay. Right? It's all about how you approach it. It's all about just like certain things. And so yes, it's either free or donation based. It's going to be definitely something that's going to be very, very, very low cost, because I want educators to have access to it. And I just want to teach them the ropes. Like, this is how you propose something to your principal to invest in your professional learning and the school being impacted by it. So that's going to be on the horizon.
All right. I got to do this PSA real quick, because it made me think about the sister, Tori Anderson. Teaching the trail.
Yes.
So she had a phenomenal Teach Like an Anti-Racist workshop. She's actually done a couple of them.
Yes.
Where you had some folks who were just tripping, over the price and other stuff. And I'm like, hold up. She's giving you all intellectual property. She's sharing it with you all, and giving you value, right? So, absolutely. And I want to say this, because if we're really going to be talking about centering Black women, we have to make sure that we show love monetarily. I'm not saying you got to give $1,000, but if you got a Cash App, send them $50. Cash App them. If you love a live that they did where they gave you something that's going to enhance your practice, give them $20. Show some love, because that money right there is what's going to allow their businesses to be sustainable.
Absolutely.
Right. So I want to put that out there in the universe.
Yes. And I'm glad you said that because, people don't realize that it costs money to have a business, right? And actually to be able to have the time to be able to devote to your business. And, I know for me, like going from having a full-time job to no longer working a full-time job, like that is or working part-time now, is a huge transition. And I'm so excited about it. But at the same time, like we have to be able to, be okay with charging people and be okay with paying for things and not feeling like everything is free. And if you're doing something free, you're doing it strategically free. There is a reason why it's free, right? It's leading to something else, but we gotta compensate folks.
Right. And then also, if you're going to do something for free, if you're the person who's benefiting from the service, leave a testimonial.
Absolutely. Something. Right.
Something like a testimonial goes a long way.
It sure does.
So that's how we build authority. That's how we build capital and credibility in this space. And that's what increases our digital footprint. Is when we have these testimonials. So I think people just take that for granted. But I don't want to get into my soapbox now because we already well over, and I want to make sure that you enjoy the rest of your night because you've had a long day.
Yes, I appreciate it. This was a dope conversation. I look forward to continuing to connect with you and collaborate with you again in the future. Okay.
Yes. So thank you, Deidra.
You're welcome.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your night.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, y'all. That's a wrap. Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of IDTALK4ED Educators Live. And as I always tell you all, I wish you all good morning, good night, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. We're going to do this again another time. Peace out, people.